So here I am at the statue of Socrates and Confucius. This statue was, or this piece of sculpture was done by Wu Weishan, a Chinese artist who is also, I believe, the head of the Chinese Academy of Art or some such official institution. And this was completed in 2021, and it's of course an apt place to have this sculpture with Socrates and Confucius here, because as we know, the Agora is where Socrates used to wander around. This is where he would engage people in conversation, and the Agora is in many ways the place that becomes the precedent for the town hall in much of Europe and the United States much later on. I just want to mention a couple of very interesting things. This piece of sculpture is described as an encounter. Socrates and Confucius, an encounter. So is it an encounter of two civilizations, the West and China? Or is it an encounter of two philosophers who perhaps in the rendering of this artist are both thought of as lawgivers? Now, if that's the case, then of course there's a very serious question to be asked whether we should think of Socrates as a lawgiver. And it is interesting that you see Socrates here, this representation here of Socrates. We see him holding a book in his left hand. Usually it is a lawgiver who is shown holding a book in one hand. We know that in India there have been representations of Manu, the alleged legendary author of the Manu Smriti or the Manav Dharma Shastra. And of course, the far more common example that people would be familiar with is statues, of which there are tens of thousands around the country, of B.R. Ambedkar, Bhimrao Ambedkar, the framer of the Constitution of India. And we know that there are also statues of Moses, who is very often represented as a lawgiver. Now, one thing that we should be quite clear about is that Athens did have a lawgiver. That lawgiver was not Socrates, it was a person called Solon, S-O-L-O-N, Solon was the lawgiver, and Solon in many respects was in fact the founder of Western democracy. The argument about the origins of Western democracy often really harken back to people like Socrates and harken back to the culture of the Agora. But the Agora did not originate with Socrates. The Agora had a much earlier history, going back to at least 2 centuries. We know that the Agora that existed before the form in which it is most well known, that is under Athenian democracy, associated with people such as Socrates and others, that well before that there was an Agora here which was actually destroyed by the Persians, and then it was rebuilt, and it was Pericles who is a principal figure in Thucydides' history of the Peloponnesian War. Pericles is the one who delivers the famous orations which become part of Thucydides' history, and he himself is a principal figure in the history of Athenian / Western democracy. But anyhow, so this is a lovely piece here, and I haven't said much about Confucius here. The reason I haven't is that we're actually in the Agora here, so we're thinking more about Socrates, but we can think certainly of Confucius, the author of the Analects, the work with which he's most often associated. And what are the Analects of Confucius? The Analects of Confucius are really, it's a work which is a series of aphorisms about how we might conceive of the good life, how we might think of a principled life. And in that sense, I think the figures of Socrates and Confucius are indeed very complementary.